Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk and welcome back to the 40-second Slimekeep Devlog. In this devlog, I finished setting up the DJ Slime boss fight and worked on some optimizations for the game. Also, if you're new here, Slimekeep is a fast-paced roguelike where you must kill and capture slimes to stop the corruption that's infected your land. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, if you saw the last Slimekeep Devlog, you may know that I started adding music into Slimekeep. And this has been a pretty straightforward process so far, just finding areas that need music implemented and setting it all up in script. But this was going to change a bit because now I had a music challenge on my hands. Over 2 years ago today, I released the 19th Slimekeep Devlog where I added in this DJ boss to the game. Except I didn't fully finish creating the boss at the time as I wanted it to be unique, having all the boss's attacks sync up to the music being played in the fight, creating for a really satisfying boss fight. And I didn't have the music made then, but now 2 years later, I did. So it was time to finish setting up this boss fight. But before I could get into actually implementing the music, there were a few things I wanted to change with and add to the fight. Firstly, the camera here just felt a bit too zoomed in, so as you guessed, I zoomed it out, which really helped. There's also this health bar on the side, which was temporary, but now since I had dedicated boss battle health bars, I updated the art and moved it to the top of the screen. But next, as I was messing around with some of the boss fight's current attacks, I realized that there just really weren't enough unique attacks to make the fight feel varied throughout. So I hopped into Sprite and created this kind of trumpet art as well as art for a bass guitar. In-game, I imagine the trumpets looking something like this, where they rotate up and down with a laser posing quite a threat to the player. Then for the bass guitars, I plan for them to be on the sides of the fight and kind of swing back and forth to play a note projectile which would travel across the screen horizontally. Now it's time to set up these attacks in the script, so I wrote a few basic functions, and here's what the trumpet attack looked like, where these trumpets just rotate up and down, creating for a bit of a challenge for the player. And for the bass guitar attack, you can see how notes fly across the screen, forcing the player to sort of weave in and out. But if you'd like to get out of the annoyance of pesky ads on your favorite websites, consider checking out the sponsor of this video, Stans. Stans is a free-to-use browser extension which blocks pop-ups and all kinds of irrelevant ads. It's used by over 1 million people across Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and Android devices. And to prove its effectiveness, here is a little experiment. Here's a standard news article from Forbes.com, and as you can see, there are quite a few annoying banner ads. Now, I can install Stans in just 2 clicks, and boom, after reloading the page, all these ads magically disappear. Not only does this create a much better browsing experience overall, but Stans also allows websites to load much faster, and they even have a tool to see how much time you've saved while browsing. So if you'd like an easy-to-use ad blocker for yourself, you can install the Stans extension from the link in the description. Thanks to Stans for sponsoring this video. Now, with his attacks made, let's talk about my plan for this fight and implementing the music, because there were a few different ways I could go. The main challenge I faced was making sure the attacks lined up with the music, which was much easier said than done. And I also wanted the fight to have elements of randomness, like in every other boss fight in the game, to add some more challenge, and so the player wouldn't get bored of the boss fight after playing it a few times. So here are the options that I imagined, each with their own pros and cons. Option 1 being, I make each attack totally random and somehow find a way to sync up the attacks to the music, by maybe having chunks of the song dedicated for different attacks and playing these chunks randomly. Now, this would definitely add a ton of randomness and variability to the fight, but at the same time, it would most likely just be really difficult to set up and the attacks might risk not flowing well together. As for option 2, I could take the song that one of my composers made and manually place attacks for each section of the song. This way I could handcraft the experience and customize attacks as I please, but at the cost of randomness. So for option 3, and the option I ended up settling on, was essentially to go with the handcraft route where I would place attacks at certain sections of the song. However, to add a bit of variability to the fight, my composer Splash, who was making the music for this fight, would create 3 unique variations of the DJ boss theme. This way I could control the boss fight experience while still changing things up for different variations, which I think ended up being a great solution. Now, on to actually setting up the boss fight. First, I imported the first variation of the DJ Slime theme, so here is a snippet of that. Shout out to Splash for making this song, but for the first thing to work on, I made it so that the beat of the song would match the speakers on the side. So check this out. I think this alone looks awesome, and you probably noticed that there's a bit of an intro area where the beat is slower. I planned for this intro to be separate from the loop of the song, as it would only play once in the boss fight, so the rest of the song can seamlessly loop, so the boss fight can hypothetically go on for an infinite amount of time. Anyways, now I got to work on planning out which attacks I wanted to play at which intervals of the fight. This took quite a while to fully plan out, but eventually I had this document to go off of. Then I wrote some really ugly code to queue up these attacks, which I will show you so you have something to roast me in the comments for. Obviously, this code took a ton of tweaking and testing to get things synced up perfectly, but overall, now the first version of the fight was done. So here's a clip. Overall, I think this turned out awesome, and the boss fight is just super cool, so let me know what you guys think in the comments. But we still weren't done just yet, as I still had 2 more variants of the fight to make. And for these variants, I still didn't think I had enough instrument attacks to vary things up enough, so I created this kind of tuba art, which doesn't really look like a tuba, and this piano art. Now understand, a lot of the fight is similar between variations, but just not 100% similar, with different orders of attacks and different attacks in general. So here is a brief clip of version 2 of the fight. And here's a brief clip of version 3 of the fight. Overall, I think this fight turned out amazing, and huge thanks to Splash for creating the music for all 3 different variations. And if you yourself think this fight looks cool, please consider wishlisting Slimekeep on Steam. It literally takes 2 clicks and helps me out a ton. Thanks. But moving on, I really just spent the next few days setting up a bunch of the other music in the game. And setting up all this music made me realize that the player really needed a way to control the volume of the music and sound effects. Now, to go about this, I found about these things called audio mixers in Unity, which essentially allow you to play audio clips through these mixers. So I could play every piece of music through a music mixer and every sound effect through a sound effect mixer. And I could simply control the volumes of the mixers, and hence all the music or sound effects, here or in script. So once I had that figured out, it was pretty simple to implement and set up in these sliders, so the player could now control each volume. Next up, I got to work on a few more pieces of polish for the game. First, BioInvasion in my Discord server made this really cool flamethrower art for the mech boss, which was a definite upgrade from the old art. I just added this art in game, and yeah, now I think the boss's flamethrower attack looks way better. But going back to audio for a second, I realized I was missing quite a few sound effects for the game, so I gathered this list and accordingly made sound effects for each one of those cases. Moving on, from my last playtest, I got a bunch of feedback that still just didn't feel like rooms had enough variety or decorations. And I really wanted to work on this so rooms would feel more alive. So I hopped into Sprite and drew up a bunch of different banners and paintings to go on walls of the rooms. But I didn't stop there. I drew up some benches, some rocks, and some vent thingies. And I still didn't stop there. Finally, I drew up some flowers, some vines, and these weird kind of dark thingies, which frankly I don't even know what they are myself. Next, I essentially just went through every single room in the game, adding these decorations here and there. And this took ages because there are, well, over 100 different possible rooms in Slimekeep, so I had a lot of manual placing to do. I probably could have, and maybe should have, made a script to randomly place these decorations across rooms, but oh well. Anyways, now these rooms just felt a lot more alive in my opinion, which was great. But with that said, I still don't think I'm 100% done yet with adding decorations and environmental variety to these rooms. Next up, I wanted to work on something that is really important to all games, which is optimization, so people can actually play the game without any major issues. I started off by trying to figure out how the Unity Profiler works, which is an optimization tool built into Unity. But if I'm being honest, even after watching a few tutorials, I still couldn't really figure it out or get any meaningful insights from it, so I just kinda didn't use it much, although I'm sure it's a helpful tool. Instead, I just kind of opened up the Unity stats menu and tried to experiment with what was causing considerable FPS use. Here, you can see I'm getting around 220 FPS by not really doing anything in the game. Although, take this number with a major grain of salt, because this is my FPS in the Unity editor game view and not in an actual build, which leads to performance differences, and it also greatly depends on your computer's specs. But anyways, after some testing, I noticed that after disabling my UI camera, which just rendered the UI onto the screen, I would gain around 50 FPS, which was quite a bit. I also noticed that after disabling the minimap canvas, I would gain around an additional 100 FPS or so. Now, after looking into this bit, I believe I found the reasoning. Basically, right now I have a separate camera rendering UI in the game, which acts as an overlay over all the other game elements. It's a bit of a long story as to why I chose to do this, but essentially without having the UI rendering through an overlay camera, it would be hidden under the fog of war effect with no real way of fully showing it due to how the effect works. But the issue here is that with the addition of this camera to just render UI, it basically has to render the game every frame like a normal camera does, which takes a lot from the CPU and lowers FPS overall. The same thing kind of goes with the minimap. Although instead of rendering to an overlay camera, I had two separate cameras rendering to two separate of these things called render textures, which would display the camera in the minimap here and in the book of slime here. I wasn't really sure of any alternatives I could use for both these types of cameras, so I looked to optimize them elsewhere. First, for the minimap, instead of hiding and showing it with code snippets like this, I made two functions for hiding and showing. The difference with these functions was that they would disable the minimap from being active and using resources when it wasn't visible on screen, which is really how it should have been from the start. This helped a bit, but still wasn't a complete solution. I wasn't sure how to potentially rework the minimap to not use extra cameras and render textures, so I struggled to think of any major optimizations here. But I still wanted to try my best, so I came up with the idea to limit the FPS of the minimap camera, as it didn't really need to render at max FPS all the time. I created this simple coroutine which would allow me to limit the FPS of a camera. So I added it to the minimap cameras and set it on an FPS of around 30. Now the minimap was a little less smooth, but I did see a very slight FPS boost. Also, remember how I said there were two cameras for the minimap? Well, one of them was solely for the minimap in the Book of Slime for some reason. So I just disabled this camera and only re-enabled it when the player was in the book, which gave quite a big increase in FPS. Now, about that UI camera, I really wasn't sure how to optimize it, even though it would tank around 70 FPS or so let me know if you have any ideas. Anyways, for the last bit of optimization, I just set it up to disable a bunch of UI objects that weren't being disabled when off screen, which I had a bad habit of not doing before. This maybe helped slightly, but nothing too noticeable. Anyways, that's all I did for now. I know it's not that much, and I didn't really touch any of the more complex optimization practices, but I'm sure I'll come back to this. And please let me know in the comments if you have any ideas of things I should look into to help with the game's performance. And that's all I have for this devlog, but before you go, I just wanted to share a few updates on the channel and Slimekeep. So if you don't know, which is probably most of you out there, I am 18 years old. I started working on Slimekeep in my freshman year of high school, and just this summer I graduated. It's really crazy to think that I've been working on this game for the past 3.5 years now, all throughout high school. But now I'm going to college, and by the time you see this video, I've probably already started my first semester. I honestly never imagined that I would still be working on Slimekeep by the time I went off to college. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm in a bit of a weird situation now. I'll obviously still try my best to work on Slimekeep and make devlogs for you guys, but I just don't really know how much time I'll have. As much as I love Slimekeep and this YouTube channel, I really do want to focus on schoolwork and just the whole college experience for the time being, without feeling a constant pressure to make progress on the game and release videos. So I'm not sure I'll be able to upload once a month like I normally do, and as for Slimekeep, unfortunately it's pretty safe for me to say that it won't be releasing this year, but hopefully I'm aiming for some time mid next year. So I hope you guys understand, and don't get me wrong, I'm not quitting or anything, and I'll still try to work on the project when I find the time, but things just might slow down a bit. But that's all from me, and before you go, if you've ever wanted to experience YouTube without ads, check out the Stan's ad blocker extension and view with ease. Again, link is in the description if you want to check it out. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, consider subscribing and wishlisting Slimekeep on Steam, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.